you're a musician. Like, how much misinformation is spread by, like, Eric Clapton is on platforms that you're on, and he's a fucking psycho. So do you remove yourself from every...
Oh, God, yeah. This is a good point. Do I remove myself from every platform where there's a psychopath? No, but Eric Clapton is also not the signature Spotify artist who got paid $100 million to essentially launch the platform. But I don't think you can make the comparison between Clapton or just some other kind of racist singer-songwriter, even though I love Clapton's music still. I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal to have my generation has had all of our heroes dragged through the mud. Jon Stewart's a hero of mine. This is kind of a... Oh, gosh. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Andy here, and my forehead has broken out, as you can see here, because of the topic I am about to discuss. Recently, last week, Jon Stewart did an interview on his own show and put out a video in which he made a blanket statement towards musicians. But he also talks about a lot of other things. He talks about Taylor Swift. He talks about Joe Rogan. I have a story about Joe Rogan, an interaction I've had with him that I will tell at the end of the video. He talks about Spotify. He talks about Neil Young. He talks about Jake Gyllenhaal. And I figured this would be a perfect video for me to react to and respond to right now.
I want to know your thoughts on Spotify and Neil Young pulling his music off it. Because, you know, we're on a podcast platform, so it's a little meta.
Joni Mitchell, too.
First of all, I love Neil Young.
Love Joni Mitchell also.
But the idea that it was worth $4 billion in value to Spotify caught me off guard. That's all I'm going to say. Listen, I'm a Cinnamon Girl fan as much as the next guy. Buffalo Springfield, sure. I'll sing that while watching old Vietnam documentaries. But when he pulled his music off of Spotify and Spotify went down, I was like, that doesn't seem right. I mean, it's value, but
I think the reason that Jon Stewart is confused here or surprised or whatever is because, like, yeah, okay, Neil Young is an oldie artist and he's not very popular, is not as popular as he once was. He's still hugely popular. And Joni Mitchell. There's a few things. One is that he doesn't understand is that old music is still extremely popular, right? And extremely influential in the modern music movement. There's a tremendous amount of politics about, like, what constitutes good music, what constitutes bad music. A lot of people feel that the pop music world is dominated by a specific chord structure that I won't go into now. Rick Beato talks about. Anyway, there's a bunch of different people who talk about it. And so a lot of people are discovering Neil Young, Led Zeppelin, or whatever for the first time. And so it's not crazy that Neil Young would draw so much water on Spotify just for that little thing. I know he's making a joke. In reality, what's also surprising him is just that, like, artists, we never put our money where our mouth is because we're so often having to just deal with, like, I put my music on Spotify because I just had to, because that's the only thing you can do as a musician. That's how people listen to music.
It's a real bummer when, you know, in order to make your activist ploy for Spotify to stop spreading disinformation, that, like, you actually need to call Taylor Swift.
But she has spread...
It's not a ploy. He issued a takedown request.
You actually need to call Taylor Swift.
But she has spread disinformation as well. She's out there saying that Jake Gyllenhaal is not a stand-up individual. And I will say this, I don't even think he has the scarf. I'll be fucking honest with you. I don't think
he's worn the scarf.
He doesn't have, that could be any scarf.
No, that's the scarf. Also, okay. Did you see the photo shoot he did
with the scarf?
Recently?
Yes.
With the scarf on and her little red glasses, he did a magazine spread.
What else can he do? What else can he do?
The song. What else?
All right. Okay, so I'm not finding a picture of him with a scarf, but I am finding this picture of him where he's wearing her heart-shaped glasses. It looks like he's being provocative. I don't know what the hell he's doing. Anyway, he's taking part in this thing as much as anybody. So, like, he can't really complain if he's getting raked over the coals. I think he understands, like, this is ultimately going to be good for his career. It keeps him kind of relevant. Not that he's irrelevant. I like his actings.
Listen, I have fought like the online legions for you, but I do not fuck around with Swifties. So you are on your own,
Absolutely.
boss. Swifties will find where you live.
You know, everybody talks about woke cancel culture and the online mobs. You haven't stepped in shit until you've stepped to One Direction or BTS or Taylor Swift. I don't care if you're a political activist on the right or the left. You have no idea.
Okay, so I've been on my channel. If you don't know, I've been doing reactions to Taylor Swift songs. I never listened to her music. I listened to it for the first time, really, the middle of 2021. And while I like a lot of her acoustic stuff, and I'm being very positive about Taylor Swift, I also talk about her honestly. I talk about the fact that I don't like pop music. I talk about the fact I did one on Harry Styles. I think he was in One Direction. And I talk about how I thought of him as just being a vapid artist. I thought about Taylor Swift as just being a vapid pop artist. And, I'm confronting those misconceptions and preconceptions that I had in my videos. But I'm also being very honest about things I like and things I don't like. The other thing is that there's no such thing as cancel culture. There is just groups of people who've historically had not enough power to say, hey, that bothers us, stop saying it. They now have enough power to say it, right? So anybody historically who's just had to be shit on by the various, kind of selected groups in our culture that get to shit on others, now they just have political power, and so it's called cancel culture mostly to kind of white men of a certain age. But in reality, it's just other groups forming their own power base. Swifties, predominantly from from my analytics, who are people who are really big fans or fans of Taylor Swift who come to my channel, seem to be primarily young women. Not all women, but primarily about 66 to 70% of the people who watch those videos are mostly women, and women, especially young women, are actually a group that have been commodified. I'm not going to mansplain, the state of women's affairs to you, but they are a group of people whose taste in music and philosophy and the world in general has always been secondary to men's. And so this idea that the Taylor Swift fans, she's a woman, her fans are I think, predominantly women. This is also kind of new to people, that these people have a power base and that they have a fan base, and that when you just trash somebody, like you'd expect, like if everybody just came out and trashed Bruce Springsteen, you'd expect a bunch of pushback because Bruce Springsteen is awesome. And I'm going to push back on him for Neil Young, his whole like cinnamon girl thing. Neil Young has a bunch of great songs. I push back on Neil Young's behalf, and so Swifties, please don't dox anybody, obviously. But yeah, I mean, if this is coming from a real place, please don't attack me. I'm sorry. So far, though, I haven't really been attacked, but knock on.
Let me go back to your original point, Chelsea, which is how do you feel? And this is going to be a blanket statement.
Okay.
And I would say this: don't leave, don't abandon, don't censor, engage. I'm not saying it's always going to work out fruitfully, but I'm always of the mindset that engagement, and especially with someone like a Joe Rogan, who is not, in my mind, an ideologue.
So we're going to get into the Joe Rogan of it all. Let me just respond to the engage. What does he say?
Don't leave, don't abandon, don't censor, engage.
Respectfully, I love Jon Stewart. I have to say this. Again, forehead, what I'm about to say. That's bullshit. It's a platitude. It's something you say. It's a cliche. I think what Jon Stewart is seeing Spotify is as just music in general. He sees Spotify, and he's correct in a lot of ways, that Spotify is how people hear their music. It is the largest of a number of different streaming services. And I think he's saying, don't pull your music out of the community of music because you're upset about what somebody is saying on the platform, because that is not engaging, that's pulling away, and that's closing yourself in and shutting yourself down to a certain extent. I'm paraphrasing what I think he means. We talk a lot about freedom of speech in this country. but we rarely talk about the freedom of association. The freedom of association is a really important aspect of and I'll actually read this is just from Wikipedia. The freedom of association encompasses both an individual's right to join or leave groups voluntarily, the right of the group to take collective action to pursue the interests of its members, and the right of an association to accept or decline membership based on certain criteria. It can also be described as the right of a person coming together with other individuals to collectively express, promote, pursue, and or defend common interests. Freedom of association is both an individual right and a collective right guaranteed by all modern and democratic legal systems, including the United States Bill of Rights, Article 11 of the European Convention on Human Rights, Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Freedom of association is a form of free speech. It is a form of engaging. What Neil Young did was incredibly brave, and what Joni Mitchell did and what artists right now are doing is incredibly brave. They are engaging. They're saying, fuck Spotify, and fuck their adherence to just not ever challenging Joe Rogan. I don't like it. It's not like the second Joe Rogan got on the platform, they jumped ship. They had had enough. And all they did was say, you can't put my music on too. This guy has operated with autonomy. He is untouchable. Nobody can say anything to Joe Rogan without his minions all jumping down your throat. We're talking about Swifties here? And Joe Rogan can literally do 9 minutes dropping. We just saw a video, and I'm going to talk about that later. But, you know, all the stuff he's said that is racially insensitive, that is insensitive to people who are transgender, all the different stuff that Joe Rogan has said. And I'm going to also talk about, defend Joe Rogan in a little bit, which I know is crazy, but just hang in there. All they said is if he's going to be on the platform, I'm not on the platform. Bye. They're allowed to say that. And it's freedom of speech. It doesn't matter what kind of eye roll you get from whomever. It doesn't matter if people are just not used to kind of whatever, liberal points of view or progressive points of view or hippies or artists or whatever you want to call it, expressing their point of view in a public way. So, Jon Stewart, I love you. I love your new show. I'm a supporter, and I can't wait to keep watching. But that's bullshit. But let's let's jump back in here.
I don't know if you remember, there was a guy who went on his podcast named Josh Zepps, who had, I think Joe said, myocarditis. Kids shouldn't get the vaccine because it causes a higher risk of myocarditis.
That's what Joe said.
Well, actually, getting COVID is a higher risk of myocarditis for kids, so they should get vaccinated. He said,
That's
no,
what
it's
Zepps
not.
said.
He said, no, I think it is. He goes, no, I'm pretty sure it's the other way. And they looked it up.
Yep.
And when they looked it up, it came out that it's a much greater risk if you get COVID and you're, 8 to 12 or 6 to 15 or whatever
Men
the
under
age range was.
35 or something.
It's a much greater risk of myocarditis catching COVID than it is getting the vaccine. And if you are an ideologue or if you are a dishonest person, that is the moment. Like Tucker Carlson in that situation never would have looked it up and would have given that look he gives like somebody's giving him a confusion enema.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson's just a propagandist.
They're just firing confusion up his ass. And Joe just went like, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't get that.
That's not what happened at all. Joe Rogan pushed back. He still did not believe Zepps.
12 to 17 developed myocarditis within 3 months of catching COVID at a rate of 450 cases per million infection. This compares to 67 cases of myocarditis per million at the same time following their second dose of Pfizer.
Yeah, so you're about 8 times likelier to get myocarditis from getting COVID than from getting the vaccine.
That's interesting.
Now,
that is not what I've read before, but also it's like, even when we're reading these things, it's like, what are we getting this from? Was this from the VAERS report? But even from the VAERS reports, when they report this stuff, it's like the amount of people that report, it's the underreporting.
There was a tremendous amount of conversation on this. Clearly, Jon Stewart saved himself the migraine of kind of going through it. I did go through it, and frankly, Joe Rogan pushed back and just refused to believe what he was seeing on Google. He's saying, I don't trust it because it's not the VAERS data, even though VAERS data is can be submitted by anybody. It's not. I don't think it's peer reviewed. I'm not an expert on this. Please yell at me anyway, but This is my understanding of the situation. And so this is just something that Stewart is frankly just literally incorrect about factually.
And that to me says, oh, that's
Still love you,
a
Johnny.
person that you can engage with. And so
he's right about that. You can engage with Joe.
Overblown rhetoric about him. And here's the other thing.
I also want to say that Jon Stewart is defending Joe Rogan here before a video came out, I believe last night or the night before, of just like 9 minutes of him just dropping N-bombs, just saying the N-word over and over and over again. He's apologized for that. It's not up to, I mean, the video's horrible. He acknowledges that. I can't defend it. I'm not going to try to defend it. It's just racist. It's just 9 minutes of like racist hate. And I'm not even going to begin to try to defend that. I'm going to tell a story in a little bit. I know I keep teasing it, just about the type of person I think Joe Rogan is. But one of the reasons that this is such a kind of scary concept for me to do is because of just that video and how it's just awful. And but this is before that video came out, so keep in mind, this is not Jon Stewart defending him on that video. He's defending him on his COVID misinformation stuff.
You're a musician. Like, how much misinformation is spread by, like, Eric Clapton is on platforms that you're on, and he's a fucking psycho. So do you remove yourself from every...
Oh, God, yeah. This is a good point. Do I remove myself from every platform where there's a psychopath? No, but Eric Clapton is also not the signature Spotify artist who got paid $100 million to essentially launch the platform. You could make a same comparison to maybe Howard Stern, who helped launch Sirius. He's really made a conscious effort to kind of go back over his career and start being a lot more sensitive to people. I'm not saying whether he's successful or not successful at that. I haven't listened to him in a long time. That's maybe a comparison you could make. But I don't think you can make the comparison between Clapton or just some other kind of racist singer-songwriter, even though I love Clapton's music still. I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal to have my generation has had all of our heroes dragged through the mud. Jon Stewart's a hero of mine. This is kind of a, oh gosh. I think it's a valid point, but I don't think it's a good comparison. The truth is, though, that if you could pull yourself off of every platform that had some sort of signature artist who was being promoted as like the mouthpiece of this particular platform, I would.
By the way, do we only do these conversations so that I will get in trouble?
Yes, that's all we do now. Is we go, John,
to a
who
certain
do you
extent,
want to
yes.
piss off today? Neil Young fans,
you know
Taylor
what?
Swift fans, or Eric Clapton fans?
I'm all three, baby.
I love them all, but my point is we all exist in this world and on this planet. And there's no question that there is egregious misinformation that's purposeful and hateful and all those other things. And that being moderated is a credit to the platforms that run them. But this overreaction to Rogan, I think, is a mistake.
This idea that it's an overreaction to Rogan. Again, I've talked about why I don't think there's cancel culture. I don't think that's a good term for it. It's because Joe Rogan isn't an ideologue. It's because he appears to be down the middle, fair-minded guy. And I'm going to tell the story about him now. This is my experience with Joe Rogan. Years ago, when I was a stand-up comedian in New York, I was doing bringer shows and I was doing like late-night open mics. Bringer shows, for people who don't know, is when you bring your own audience. So you bring 5 people, you get 5 minutes of stage time. In reality, what happens is you invite 118 of your friends, 2 show up, and you get 2 minutes or a minute and a half of stage time, and you end up trying to convince your friends to pay, $14.50 for 2 watered down rum and cokes, and it's not a good thing. If you're a comedian, don't do bringer shows. They're not a good way to get seen, because if you do get seen or get heard of by agents or something, they're just going to think, oh, well, the audience was all brought, so I'm not going to think he's actually funny or she's actually funny. They're kind of scammy. They are a good way to get stage time. I don't know. Maybe people have different opinions on bringer shows. That's my opinion. open mics are kind of where you got to start. Anyway, so I was doing that. I was doing the rounds in New York, doing bringer shows, doing open mic nights, and this was right around the time that Joe Rogan was having this huge public spat with Carlos Mencia over joke stealing and whether or not Mencia had stolen jokes from, I think, Cosby or from other people.
And there comes a point in time in your material where you don't have anything about the subject, so you take other people's shit. You know what? Over and over again. I don't want to attack. That's not true. You're a great performer who likes people's shit.
And joke stealing, joke thievery was just kind of very in the popular culture. It was very in the zeitgeist. Everybody was talking about it. And I wrote to him. I wrote to every comedian on MySpace, which was the app at the time. And two wrote me back. One was Stephen Wright, who wrote me back, "Thanks for stopping by," which was very nice of him. And the other one was Joe Rogan. Now, before I go on, I know you're going to say, hey, it wasn't really Joe Rogan. Come on now. It was a MySpace account by somebody who wanted to pretend to be Joe Rogan. Maybe. I really don't think so based on what he said in this note. It really appeared to me to be from Joe Rogan. So anyway, I write him. I say, hey, Joe, I'm doing these late night shows. I'm doing these bringer shows. I'm doing these late night open mics. And most of the audience, or at least portion of the audience, are other comedians who are there watching the show. And I'm worried that they're going to steal my material. What do I do? By the way, I wasn't actually super worried about this. I just wanted an in to like talk to him. I was a little bit worried about it, but I figured, I can write about this. He wrote me back like a 3-paragraph letter, like a full, carefully, thoughtfully, incredibly kind of him to write me this letter. He assured me that comedians aren't like that. The comedians, I think he felt responsible. He didn't want me to feel like comedians are going to stab each other in the back or that comedians are going to steal from each other. He told me in the letter, he's like, there's a certain kind of ethic that comedians have. Who tells it when, or who told it first, and did they both think of it independently, who can tell it in which town, et cetera, et cetera. He explained kind of the rules, and he said if you're doing comedy around these old-timey comics, they would never do that. Also, your material is probably not good enough to be stolen anyway. And I wish MySpace still existed so I could show you guys the thing, but anyway, he just really didn't have to do that. He wrote me. I took the Dawkins class in college. I learned that altruism in humans is a myth, and I kind of believed it. But this seemed like an honestly altruistic gesture that he was doing. He didn't, he probably felt a certain way responsible, but he really didn't have to go out of his. I was just a kid. This was like 2008 or something, 2007, 2008. I was in my 20s, and this was his. I had no power to give him. I had nothing to offer him, and he did not have to take the time out to respond to me. And he did, and he did so really thoughtfully. And I thought at that time, I was like, oh wow, there maybe are good people in Hollywood. That's what I thought at the time. Now, why I am saying this is because I am not trying to say that Joe Rogan isn't racist. I don't know that. Based on what I saw the other day, I don't know that. I can't say that. Before yesterday, I would probably have said that. That's a vicious video, man. And he talks about it, and I think he really deeply regrets it.
Hello, friends. I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks fucking horrible, even to me. But it looks terrible even in context. My sincere and humble apologies.
He talks about like a thing where he went, I don't even want to talk about the movie thing that he went to, man. That was not cool at all. And so I'm not defending any of that. What I'm saying is that I think Joe Rogan is who he is talking to at the moment. I think Joe Rogan puts himself in the shoes of the person he's talking to, whether that's a kid on MySpace that is talking about a comedy career that he doesn't have, whether that's a neo-white supremacist sitting across from him at his podcast, whether that's Bernie Sanders coming to talk to him about Medicare for all and trying to help people, okay? he is going to empathize with the person he's talking to. And unfortunately, while that makes you a good host, it can also lead you into white supremacy and some other kind of elements of hypocrisy that I think Joe Rogan is engaged in.
But he has 4-hour conversations, and they are expansive, and he may say some things that you think is misinformation, and he may platform people that you think are wrong, but to single that out as something so egregious
But Spotify
as to
singled
have
him
to
out.
be, I just don't, I think there are dishonest bad actors in the world. And identifying those is so much more important to me.
So what he's saying here is that intention is important, and and that because Joe Rogan in his mind doesn't have negative intentions, that he should be forgiven, or that it shouldn't be such a big deal and people shouldn't react in the way they do. Yes, intention is important. Karma is based on intention. Always remember that. But what you actually end up doing is important too. When they elevated him, when Spotify gave him $100 million and took him off of YouTube and say, we're taking the biggest podcaster in the world and we're making him our guy, they gave him more power than he had before, A. And B, he has to take, with great power comes great responsibility. The Spider-Man thing. It's true. Whether he likes it or not, he represents a huge number of people and influences a huge number of people. And as much as he wants to say, hey, I'm just a comedian, don't listen to me, he also says, listen to me, everybody listen to me always. Spotify is saying that too. So again, I just think Jon Stewart is a little bit off base here.
And I also think sometimes those grand gestures of, I'm removing myself, doesn't necessarily take into account, like you're on Comcast, right? Comcast or Time Warner. So if you're on any cable station, right, they've got Fox News on. You telling me Fox News isn't a willful purveyor of misinformation?
Yes, it is.
Dishonest to its core.
Absolutely. Multiple networks.
So now everybody on
Yeah.
TV has to pull out of their fucking shows or deplatform because...
That's a gaslight, okay? He's trying to make it seem like they're arguing something that would be an absurd argument. Or he's trying to make it seem as if Neil Young is arguing something that he isn't. But also, it's not crazy to say, like, I don't want to pay Time Warner Cable if they're going to give some of my money to Fox News. Or if you like Fox News and you dislike, I don't know, NPR or something, or CNN, even though CNN is... I don't consider it at all to be left-wing. I consider it to be pretty corporatist. But let's say you hate CNN. And you say, I don't want to put my money, I don't want to pay Time Warner Cable as long as they're going to give some of that to CNN. You absolutely have your right to do that. And he's just not used to it. Because people like Neil Young and liberals in general don't do it. But maybe we should.
On the in the same tube that
Again,
you
it's
exist,
taking part.
they exist.
It's engaging.
I've been in his position on a much smaller scale, where people suddenly look to you as, by you doing it, by you platforming someone. That's the big word they use. You're platforming someone.
Well, that's what it
and
is.
you don't push back hard enough,
Yeah.
or you don't do it to the manner that they would do it.
Right.
Once you go down that road of, if you have a lot of listeners and you say something...
By the way, he's talking about being criticized here. People are criticizing him for not pushing back hard enough. He's not saying when I shouldn't push back hard enough. When you go down that road of criticizing those mistakes, that's a bad thing. No, people are going to criticize you. If you're Chuck Todd and you have on a climate scientist, a climate denier, a climate change denier, and you don't challenge them, people are going to say, hey, Chuck Todd, you should challenge that liar on your channel. But of course, we're not used to that. So this is all new to John.
Something that's either incorrect or possibly harmful. We are in competition for ideas and minds.
Yeah.
And unless you can come up with, it's sort of like, we used to talk about this with the war on terror, right? I always thought one of the biggest reasons why the war on terror was such a fucked idea was the general strategy of it was 19 people who were extremists took action and bombed the World Trade Center and did this terrible thing and killed 3,000 people. And so we were going to go bomb the shit out of that country until 19 people wouldn't want to do that anymore.
No.
Meanwhile, it was hatched in like a basement in Hamburg, and the world is interconnected through ideas. Like, unless you have a bomb that can kill ideas, you're just chasing, it's a doomed strategy. Like, make better arguments. I'm not saying that it'll work, but you can't cloister yourself to what's out there. You have to know.
So right now, Jon Stewart is conflating what Neil Young did with somebody failing to argue well enough against Joe Rogan's misinformation. Neil Young or whatever, musicians in general, shouldn't remove themselves from Spotify, the platform, because you will be not because you need to make a better argument against Joe Rogan. It's absurd. What he's talking about here is COVID misinformation, and he's saying, hey, if you want Joe Rogan to not have as much power spreading COVID misinformation, like have another show that's better than his, be bigger than his. No, the thing is that Joe Rogan's a unique person. He created a certain type of podcast in a way. I didn't create the podcast, but he kind of innovated a lot of things about podcasting that makes him such a compelling person to listen to and watch. And the fact that he has now been tricked, frankly, as far as I can tell, into being an anti-vaxxer is doesn't have anything to do with who's making the right arguments. It's about saying, hey, this guy's spreading misinformation. I don't want to be associated with it. This whole thing of being that Neil Young is censoring him, or that we're fucking censoring him. Nobody's censoring him. Nobody's censoring him. Joe Rogan has the biggest mouthpiece in the world. If you criticize him, everybody shits on you on come on. This conflation with like fucking bombing Iraq, that's not what Neil Young did. He said, I don't want my music on there. And then the world said, me too. Well, not the world, but a lot of people did. A lot of people in the music industry said, yeah, me too. This is how I feel. And I want to express that point of view. And Spotify isn't going to go away. Joe Rogan isn't going to go away. But now people know that's their point of view, and we're all engaging, and we're all talking about it. This is not disengagement. It's just I dislike this argument from a really great, honestly, like an American hero. Like, I love Jon Stewart. I hate this.
To a niche point within that, I'll say is that, and this is something that I struggle a lot with my internet content, is that when you are one of the people with a platform speaking and you travel in the waters of empathy, wanting to do better, wanting to do the right thing, and you mess up, people react way differently than if Joe Rogan traveling in the waters of like, maybe vaccines are bad for you, don't take them. Like, he could mess up and will never face consequences.
Yeah.
In the way that if you're known for trying to do the right thing, you will face
She's
intense
pushing back here. I like it.
Like, the scale is off.
Chelsea, if I go on Twitter, I don't have to go on there more than 30 seconds before I can find somebody letting me know what they will never forgive me for. One of the biggest questions I always used to get asked was,
I don't understand that.
Why do you have O'Reilly on your show? And I go, well, I have people in my family that are to the right of him, and I still talk to them. So why not talk to him? And I feel like you have to engage. Like, how do you not engage with people? Like, the whole point of engagement is hopefully clarification. Now, you may not get it. It may be a fool's errand, but I will never give up on engagement.
Jesus, this term engagement, that like Neil Young is taking his music and going home and like sitting in his basement. No one can hear my songs, it's shit for me. That's not what's happening, Jon Stewart. What's happening is people are saying, fuck Spotify. That is what is happening. Nobody is saying that like we should stop talking about shit. What they're saying is fuck Spotify.
And by the way,
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the algorithm of misinformation than the purveyor of misinformation. Misinformation
Absolutely.
will always be out there, but if the algorithm drives people further and further down the rabbit hole, the fucking algorithm is the amplifier and the catalyst of extremism.
At what point does Joe Rogan like take any fucking responsibility for the shit he said. It's his buddy. He's been a comedian with Joe Rogan for whatever, 50 years, 30 years, 20, I don't know. We shan't ever criticize Joe Rogan because he means well. I think Joe Rogan means well. I said that earlier in the video. I also talked about the horrible racist video he put out, and I'm not defending that. But I think Joe Rogan ultimately means well. Doesn't change the fact that he needs to be criticized every now and then.
And if you can, I would much rather fuck with the algorithm than deplatform and all these other
it's not
things.
An either or.
And Maria talked about that.
Maria Ressa.
Maria talked about that in the Freedom episode, how an algorithm can push you further into whatever ideas were kind of expressed within your first search history and how you can continue to go in either direction. And that to me is like, that's scientific. And that's like also like innumerable because it just kind of throws stuff at you faster than you can blink.
Nobody stops to take a breath and think about what's being said. Nobody stops. That you're not there to take a breath. You're there. It's all a bullfight. Where's my red cape?
Also, Twitter is not for nuance, and Twitter is not for context. Both of those things can't exist there. If you tweet with nuance and context, you will barely exist there. It's not.
The aggregators are there to distill things to their greatest potential energy. And their greatest potential energy is what's the most inflammatory.
Yeah.
Do you get my point? Like,
Spotify should just go away because Spotify is shitty. They pay a lot less than other streaming services. They pay. There's this great Medium article. I'll link to it here. Okay, let's look at these Spotify numbers here. This wonderful company that we're defending. Okay, because Spotify is now just considered like the music global commons, right? It's not like one of a bunch of different streaming services. And Neil Young is not removing his music from every streaming service. He's just removing it from Spotify. So this whole like taking a stand against the censorship of evil Neil Young, that's just not the case. Okay, but let's actually look at what Spotify is. Right? So this is from a Medium article here written by this artist. Okay. I'm going to guess Tyus Nehanius. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be funny. Tyus Nehanius, that's my best guess. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to figure that out. And he talks about, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but he just compares the different streaming services and what they paid him per stream or per purchase of a single. And here we go. We can just scroll to the bottom here. He's nice enough to give us a rundown here at the bottom, and that is here. Summary of outcomes. So we can see Amazon, 73 cents per buy. That's out of $1. So that's 73% per purchase. Pretty good. Okay, Amazon Prime, $1.39 per 1,000 streams, which is terrible. Amazon Unlimited, $10.96 per 1,000 streams, which is very good. I think the best. Angani was less than $1 per 1,000 streams. Apple Music is pretty good at $6.77. Deezer's at $4.12, Google Play. So we can see all these numbers here, and you can pause and look as you need to. But you can see Spotify here right at the bottom. NetEase is a Chinese company. They pay a joking amount. MediaNet, and there's all these kind of tinier ones. But Spotify pays about $2.30 per 1,000 streams. They pay pretty much at the bottom end of where they can pay and still be considered in the major streaming service to be still considered like in the upper echelons of what our people get paid who put their music on Spotify. I'm on Spotify. I've had my music on there for about 4 years. I think I've made $17. Okay, so that'll tell you where I'm at. And okay, so streaming is a viable medium for music, but you just have to work with a company who knows how to value artists. Spotify really just doesn't value artists. Spotify values money, cash money. And that's why their valuation died the other day when Neil Young jumped out, because they knew, because investors on Wall Street knew, well, Neil Young's jumping ship. A whole bunch of other musicians are going to jump ship now. And that's not good for business. But again, I feel like Jon Stewart's conflating a lot of things here that aren't really conflatable.
On Spotify, and you've got to figure out a way to neuter the algorithms. That's where the true pain is.
So, like, I agree with him to a certain extent on the algorithms. The algorithms really value hyperbolic content, just controversial content that's going to get people angry and typing and clicking over everything else. I don't know if neuter is the best word there, but I definitely think that maybe you could choose your algorithm. Please don't send me down this wormhole. Please send me down the positivity wormhole. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to be able to ask from YouTube?
Here's the thing that you always have to remember. You
good.
cannot outsmart the crowd. You cannot outsmart the mob. So you can't be circumspect. You can't be. You have to try and express yourself as clearly and as purely as you can.
So this is what you do when you're expressing yourself. If you're Neil Young, what you do is you say to the mob, hey, I'm going to take my music away from this specific company because I don't like their political stance and I don't like how they're treating artists. And that's my political stance, and now you know it.
And fucking come what may. And because there is no way to formulate an opinion.
What is the alternative for Neil Young? To put out a bunch of like songs about how Joe Rogan is wrong? You know what you do, Neil Young? What you should do is you should release an album called Fuck Joe Rogan. And it should be like a folky 60s rock version of why Joe Rogan is wrong. I hate making fun of Jon Stewart.
In this world that will not bring you from some corner you didn't see some form of scorn and retribution and contempt and criticism.
Yeah,
and you just have to try and sift through and see, like, is there anything constructive in that? And if not, fucking move on.
Okay, so this is my final thought on this whole thing. For years now, when Twitter came out, Jon Stewart hated Twitter, very publicly hated Twitter, because it was everybody just sputtering out their opinions online in these tiny fragments with no context. And at the time, what he did for a living and what he does now for a living is he sputters out his opinion online. Somehow, this belief that other people kind of criticizing and responding to him is a road we shouldn't go down, I just very respectfully disagree. He is a really, really wise man on a whole host of issues, but here I think he is defending his friend Joe, and I don't think that he is being objective. And I don't think he's looking at the situation. Neil Young is not saying everybody in the world, you can't have my music anymore. He's saying Spotify, you can't have my music anymore. Fuck Spotify. And that's the video for this week. Or anyway, for this video. I hope you enjoyed my incredible anger. Hopefully this flare-up will go down. Jon Stewart, I still love you. Joe Rogan, I'm hoping for the best for you. Neil Young, whatever you need from me, just call and ask. Swiftie fans, I really hope you don't attack other people. I mean, let people know what you think, but hopefully you're not doxing people or harming them in any way, shape, or form. I don't hate Jon Stewart or the problem with Jon Stewart. In fact, I recommend people watch it. I think they've had a bunch of great interviews, great content. I like these people. I'm not against this show. I disagree with him here. I love you. I'll see you next time. Keep playing.